December 22, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. A desperate frozen silence has settled over the besieged town of Bastogne. Encircled, outgunned, and shrouded in a chilling fog, the 22,000 men of the 101st Airborne Division and attached units brace for another onslaught. Their ammunition is low, their winter gear insufficient, and hope is a dwindling commodity. To the west, the commander of the 12th U.S. Army Group, General Omar Bradley, stares at situation maps filled with menacing red arrows. His phone rings. On the other end is General George S. Patton, commanding the Third Army. The question hanging over the entire Allied High Command is simple. Can Bastogne be saved? And in that moment of supreme crisis, history would turn on a mere two words. This is the story of desperation, audacity, and the brief, pivotal exchange that sealed a fortress's fate. This is when the 101st was surrounded at Bastogne, the two words Bradley said to Patton. To understand the gravity of that phone call, we must first step back to December 16th, Hitler's last great gamble in the West, Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Ardennes Offensive, or the Battle of the Bulge, had shattered the quiet front. Over 200,000 German troops, spearheaded by elite panzer divisions, poured through the weakly held Ardennes, aiming for the port of Antwerp. Their goal was to split the Allied armies in two. The initial German assault created chaos, confusion, and a massive bulge in the Allied lines. Amid this collapse, one road junction became critically important: the small Belgian town of Bastogne. 7 major roads converged here. Whoever held Bastogne controlled the speed and flow of the German advance and the Allied counterattack. Rushed into the breach was the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. Under the acting command of Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, they were trucked over 100 miles in freezing conditions, without proper winter attire, and ordered to hold Bastogne at all costs. They were not alone. Elements of the 10th Armored Division's Combat Command B, the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, and shattered remnants of other units joined them, forming a defensive perimeter. But they were arriving piecemeal into a maelstrom. Meanwhile, over 100 miles to the south, General George Patton's U.S. Third Army was grinding its way eastward, battling toward the Saar region of Germany. Patton, a student of history and speed, had anticipated a German counterstroke. He had even begun privately planning for it. The Supreme Allied Commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Bradley knew that if anyone could react with lightning speed, it was Patton and his Third Army. The strategic situation was now a deadly race. Could the 101st hold the Bastogne cork in the bottle long enough for Patton to redirect his entire army, turn it 90 degrees north, and attack into the flank of the German Bulge? The lives of over 20,000 encircled men, and potentially the outcome of the campaign, hung in the balance. By December 19th, the noose around Bastogne was tightening. The 101st's perimeter, though tenacious, was thin. German forces, the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, and the elite Panzer Lehr Division began probing attacks from the east and west. The weather was a formidable ally for the Germans. Constant low clouds and fog grounded the Allies' overwhelming air power. The men on the ground were alone. Inside Bastogne, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Medical supplies were scarce. Surgeons operated in candlelit cellars. The cold was so intense that men risked frostbite just touching the metal of their weapons. Artillery shells, the great equalizer, were being rationed. Each shot had to count. On December 20th, the encirclement was complete. The last narrow corridor into Bastogne was sealed by the 2nd Panzer Division. The 101st Airborne was now truly surrounded. That same day, General Patton was summoned to a tense conference at Eisenhower's headquarters in Verdun. Pause. In a damp, chilly room, the Allied High Command faced the grim reality. Eisenhower asked Patton how quickly he could turn his Third Army north to counterattack. Patton, with characteristic bravado born of meticulous staff work, replied, on December 21st, with 3 divisions. The room was stunned. It was an impossible promise. He was asking 3 combat-hardened divisions to disengage from their own fierce fighting, move over 100 miles along icy, congested roads in brutal weather, and launch a coordinated attack into a raging battle, all in barely 48 hours. But Patton wasn't bluffing. His G3 staff, led by the brilliant Colonel Paul Harkins, had already prepared several contingency plans, including one for this exact scenario. Eisenhower, skeptical, told him to aim for the 23rd. But Patton had already set the machinery in motion. Even before the Verdun meeting concluded, coded orders were flashing over Third Army wires. The 4th Armored Division, the 26th Infantry Division, and the 80th Infantry Division began their historic pivot. Tanks, trucks, and troops performed a logistical ballet of unprecedented scale and urgency on frozen roads. Back in Bastogne, December 21st and 22nd passed under a cloak of gray dread. The attacks intensified. German artillery pounded the perimeter. Small arms fire chattered constantly in the snowy woods. Then at 11:30 a.m. on December 22nd, a scene unfolded that would become legend. 4 German soldiers, 2 of them carrying a white flag, approached the American lines near the village of Ramonville. They carried a typed ultimatum for the American commander. Pause. It was delivered to General McAuliffe. The message demanded the honorable surrender of the encircled town to avoid total annihilation. The German commander gave him 2 hours to decide. McAuliffe, weary and annoyed, read the note and famously muttered, "Ah, nuts." After conferring with his staff, he decided his initial response was the only appropriate one. The formal reply, typed up and delivered back to the German envoys, was a single glorious word: nuts. The defiance was electrifying, but it was a defiance born of sheer will, not material strength. Every man in Bastogne knew the German threat of annihilation was not an empty one. They had bought time, but time was running out. The euphoria of nuts faded quickly into the harsh, frozen reality of December 23rd. The weather broke. For the first time in a week, the skies cleared. While this allowed the skies to fill with hundreds of Allied cargo planes dropping vital supplies, a sight that lifted morale immeasurably, it also revealed the true desperation of their position. From the air, the pilots could see the tightening ring of German forces, and on the ground, the clear skies brought a new horror. Relentless, pinpoint German air and artillery attacks, the perimeter was contracting under immense pressure. To the southeast, the key village of Marvy changed hands multiple times in bloody close quarters fighting. The field hospitals were overflowing. Ammunition, particularly artillery shells and 30 caliber machine gun rounds, was once again critically low despite the airdrops. Many supplies had drifted into German lines. The men were at the breaking point. They fought in a haze of exhaustion, their uniforms stiff with frozen mud and sweat, their beards caked with ice. The mental toll of being surrounded, of knowing there was no retreat, was as punishing as the physical cold. Pause. At his headquarters in Luxembourg City, General Omar Bradley was a man under almost unbearable strain. His 12th Army Group had been ripped in two by the offensive. He was fighting to maintain communication with and control of his 1st Army to the north, while managing the crisis in the south. Reports from Bastogne were fragmented, often grim. He knew the 101st could not hold indefinitely. The weight of command pressed down on him. Those were his men trapped in that frozen hell. And then the phone rang. It was George Patton. It was time for the counterattack. Patton's lead element, the 4th Armored Division's Combat Command R, had begun its northward push on schedule on the 22nd, but had immediately met fierce resistance. The German 5th Parachute Division and elements of the Panzer Lehr were defending the southern approaches to Bastogne with fanatical determination. Every village, every crossroads, every frozen creek bed was a kill zone. The relief column was advancing, but at a crawl. They were still miles away. Patton, ever aggressive, was pushing his commanders relentlessly. But he needed something from Bradley. He needed clarity, authorization, and perhaps, in his own way, reassurance. The phone call was direct, a conversation between 2 old friends and now senior commanders in the midst of a catastrophe. Patton outlined the stiff resistance, the slow progress. He conveyed his absolute determination to break through, and then he likely posed the unspoken question that hung over everything. Do I have your full, unwavering support to drive these men to the limit? To risk everything? To save Bastogne? The fate of the 101st Airborne, the momentum of the entire Allied counteroffensive, and the legacy of both generals compressed into this single secure telephone line. In that critical moment, with the map of the Ardennes burning in his mind, General Omar Nelson Bradley did not hesitate. He did not offer a lengthy tactical analysis. He did not voice the doubts that surely plagued him. He understood the man on the other end of the line. He understood what Patton needed to hear. Not a directive, but a grant of absolute trust. It was a moment for simplicity, for resolve stripped bare. His response was just 2 words. 2 words that conveyed everything: permission, confidence, urgency, and a shared burden. He said to Patton, "Get going." Pause. Narrator. In military parlance, it was an unequivocal execute order. It was the final unlock. For Patton, a commander who thrived on aggressive action, it was the green light he demanded. There would be no second-guessing from headquarters, no cautions about preserving strength. The mission was singular: relieve Bastogne. The effect on Patton, and by extension, the entire Third Army, was galvanizing. He immediately transmitted that fierce energy down the chain of command. The order "Get going" transformed into a driving imperative that reached every tank commander, every infantry squad leader pushing north. The focus of the relief effort sharpened to a razor's point on Combat Command B, 4th Armored Division, led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams. His command tank was named Thunderbolt. Abrams, a relentless and cunning fighter, pushed his force along the axis toward the town of Assenois, the last major village before Bastogne. He decided on a daring, brutal plan: a nighttime attack. On the afternoon of December 26th, Abrams assembled his spearhead, a company of Sherman tanks from the 37th Tank Battalion and a company of armored infantry from the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion. He gave simple, direct orders. They would charge straight up the main road to Assenois, firing every weapon they had, not stopping for anything. Artillery would lay down a devastating time-on-target barrage on the village just seconds before they entered. As dusk fell, the little column rolled forward. The artillery roared, engulfing Assenois in fire and smoke. Pause. Shermans fired their 76mm guns point-blank into buildings. Machine guns hosed down the tree lines. They crashed through the village, past stunned and surviving German defenders, and burst out the northern side. Ahead lay a dark, wooded road. In the lead tank was Lieutenant Charles Bogus. Through the gloom and swirling smoke, his crew saw figures ahead in foxholes. Were they German or American? Bogus, standing in his turret, yelled out, "Come here! Is this the way to Bastogne?" A figure emerged from a foxhole. It was an American paratrooper of the 326th Airborne Engineer Battalion, part of the 101st Perimeter. The soldier, amazed, replied, "Yes, get down that road." At 4:50 p.m. on December 26, 1944, Lieutenant Bogus's tank rolled into the 101st Airborne's lines near the hamlet of Remy-Champagne. The corridor was thin, barely a thread. It would take days of brutal fighting to widen it into a secure supply line. But the siege of Bastogne was broken. Patton had done it. Bradley's 2-word order had been fulfilled. The relief of Bastogne was not the end of the Battle of the Bulge, but it was its definitive turning point. The German High Command's last strategic reserve had been spent and failed to capture the vital road junction. The 101st Airborne's stand became the stuff of instant legend, a testament to American infantry resolve. Their casualties were severe: over 1,200 wounded and nearly 300 killed in action during the siege. But they had inflicted losses on the Germans many times greater and had thrown the entire enemy timetable into disarray. For the Third Army's relief force, the cost was also high. The fight to open and widen the corridor to Bastogne would continue for weeks in some of the most brutal small-unit actions of the war in Europe. The human element of this story is captured in that brief exchange between Bradley and Patton. Get going. It was leadership distilled. Bradley, often portrayed as the calm, prudent counterweight to Patton's flamboyance, demonstrated that at the moment of crisis, he could match his subordinates' audacity with unwavering support. He bore the responsibility so Patton could wield the sword. For his leadership at Bastogne, General Anthony McAuliffe would receive the Distinguished Service Cross. The 101st Airborne as a whole earned a Presidential Unit Citation, a rare honor for an entire division. Patton's 90-degree turn and relentless drive north remain one of the most staggering feats of logistics and operational agility in modern military history. It validated his aggressive philosophy and proved the flexibility of the American Army. But it was made possible by a chain of command that trusted him. That trust was encapsulated in two words on a crackling telephone line. The legacy of Bastogne is multifaceted. It is the paratrooper's defiant nuts. It is the tanker's weary face as he linked up in the dark woods. And it is also the critical behind-the-scenes moment where a senior commander, understanding both the man and the mission, cut through the fog of war with a simple, powerful command: get going. The stand at Bastogne and its dramatic relief marked a pivotal chapter in the struggle for Europe, a story of resilience, sacrifice, and command decisions that echoed across history. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to Webu2 Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.